Yeah, tonight I want to talk about the three photographers who inspired me. I sort of say early 90s, but probably right through the 90s, to be fair. For people who don't know me, I started with a camera when I was about 12 or 13, using this little Kodak Instamatic 233, which is a rangefinder actually, square format, and I used to love it. Took lots of pictures on that when I was younger. And then when I was 16 and I sort of started to get a bit more serious, I bought a Zenith EM 35mm film. I don't know if you can see that. And I was 16 when I got that, and I sort of learned everything on that. It's a big old heavy thing. Man, it's not quite as heavy as the Fuji. But yeah, so I had 2 or 3 years of that, maybe even a bit longer. And it got to about 1992 and I was starting to sort of get a bit more serious into it. And I bought a Canon, I think it was an EOS 1. I've not got it anymore because I traded it in for my first digital camera. But it was a serious bit of kit. And also bought my first set of grads at this point. So there was sort of no going back from then. And back then, as it is now, Fuji Velvia 50 was the choice for film. Sure. It was also the similar time that I started buying magazines. And I know one of them was definitely practical photography. I don't think that's going anymore. Amateur photographer, and I can't think of the third magazine. But at the time, there was 3 photographers who were always in the magazines at just a period of time. And that's why these 3 photographers who inspired me. And they were Tom Mackie. Now, Tom used mainly 5x4, but he also did use the Fuji GX617 as well. Now, the 5x4, for anyone who doesn't know, is a large format. Use a negative of 5 inches by 4 inch. I don't know if you can see that. If you put it next to my face, you sort of can see how big a negative it is. It's colossal. And if you see the little square in the corner, that's your full frame sensor. So you get an idea of the size of negatives that they were using. And yeah, and they always used Fuji Velvia, which was a very difficult film to use. All 3 photographers used the same film back then. In fact, I think that's only anybody used. I was the same. But it was a film which didn't take any prisoners. It only had 4 stops of dynamic range, and a third of a stop either way could make or break your image. Blow your eye out, and it was throw it in bin, basically. So yeah, there was a lot of bracketing done as well on these cameras, because obviously when you're shooting Velvia, you can't just take one shot and hope it was right. You needed to bracket to play safe. And like when you're shooting on the Fuji GX17, you only get 4 images per roll. So it's basically 1 composition per roll. So yeah, that was another thing what sort of got me into the bigger cameras, because it was always a challenge. So yeah, so the first photographer is this chap, Tom Mackie. Now, Tom was born in the States. He was brought up in the American Midwest, and he photographed all of America at some point in his career. He was an architectural photographer shooting his 5x4 for a long, long while. And he married a girl from Norwich, and then decided to move back to England with her, where he set up his photography business 35 years ago. And of course, Norwich is right next to the Norfolk Broads, and this is a place he fell in love with. And this is all the images that I saw and loved were from the Norfolk Broads. And Tom is renowned for his bold use of colour compositions. He's, like I say, he's photographed the globe. He's just an amazing photographer, and he's had work published everywhere you can think of. Nowadays, well, maybe not this year, but he runs workshops all over the world, and he's only home 9 days at a time. So the first image I ever saw of Tom Mackie's was a 3rd mill at dawn on the Norfolk Broads, taken on his Westerfield 5x4 large format, shot on Fuji Velvia 50. And I remember early on, before I even got to know these 3 chaps, that this was the sort of thing I wanted to do. I remember appreciating the light from an early age. And then obviously when I started seeing these 3 photographers work, it was sort of, that was it really. It was sort of set in stone for me. But yeah, just a simple composition, and it just really works. again, like all the images you see, all dawn and dusk when the light's at its best. These guys, as myself, we don't shoot in any other light. If the light's not right, we don't shoot. And when you're shooting Felvia 50 or well, any film, to be fair, nowadays, you can't afford to shoot wildly. You've got to really fine tune your work, and you only shoot what you really want to shoot, and if the conditions are absolutely perfect. But yeah, so this was a big learning curve seeing these first sort of few images of Tom's, because it was get out of bed and get out there. Now this Buttermere, again on the 5x4, this, you'll see a shot of mine later on where I got the inspiration from for my version of this. And it's a shot that you can only get in autumn. The bracken's got to be orange. You need a still lake, obviously. You need a little bit of mist if you're lucky. You need a clear sky, so you've got the perfect light on the following bank. And the key to this shot is you're waiting for the sun to just get right to the water's edge before it starts clipping the tops of these trees. So you've got the trees in shade, which gives you that great contrast. And like I say, you'll see my shot later on, and you'll see my work in this. I believe later on in his when he turned to digital, Tom, he actually put a red canoe in here, and it actually looks quite well. But there you go. So onto his next image. Again, getting out early. That's what it's all about, especially in these winter months. Another beautiful scene on the Norfolk Broads, taken at dawn. Beautiful side light, soft winter side light. And I think what makes the image for me is that these reeds here are in the bottom left corner, which have obviously had the sun on a little bit longer, and it's just thawed them out and it's brought the colour out. And it's just, yeah, very simple composition, classic rule of thirds. Yeah. And to be fair, these images, it doesn't do them justice seeing them like this. If you see a sheet of 5x4 Velvia slide film and a light box, it will blow you away, because there's so much detail in them. Yeah, I remember seeing this in Amateur Photographer. It was a full page centre spread, and it was like, wow, such a simple composition. Thurn mill, massive passing storm, beautiful golden light at dawn, lighting up all them reeds. And again, it was just, it was another big thing for me to get out there and get out early. That's, I was learning all the time, and I'm fully self-taught myself. I've had no formal training at all. So it was learning off these guys and learning by my overexposed and underexposed Velvia. This was the very first image I saw of Tom's on the Fuji GX617. Again, Thurn Mill, another classic Norfolk Broad scene. Brilliant composition coming from the left. And the reeds just make it for me in the foreground, just superb. Following the river right round to Thurn Mill and St Bennett's Mill, and then round to the rising sun. Again, another tricky shots these on Velvia when you're shooting right into the line. But again, another image what hugely inspired me. And from an early age, I remember thinking, I seem to see things panoramic. I remember getting my own slides back and cutting the top and bottom off them just to improve them, And I couldn't afford this camera, because this camera cost an absolute fortune back in the 90s when it was first come out. So yeah, that's how I used to do my own panos back then. Yeah, just an absolute lovely image. So yeah, and since in the last few years I've become quite good friends with Tom Mackey. We met up with him on Isle of Skye, and he's a lovely chap. He's very knowledgeable, and he loves sharing his knowledge with you. And yeah, another classic scene, Italy. Can't beat Italy, can you? Another just very, very simple composition. Church in the third, and just let everything else drop into place. Let the morning light do the rest. And it's seeing these images that I started making me think about travelling, rather than just hanging around Lancaster and Morecambe and Lakes. Even though it took me a few years to start travelling. I eventually did it. But yeah, it's huge thanks to Tom and the other two chaps I'm going to talk about what inspired me to do that. So then we move on to Lee Frost. Now, Lee Frost was born in Barnsley in Yorkshire. He lived in Northumberland for a long while, and also uses the Fuji GX617. At that time, he's used hundreds of cameras as Lee. But at the time when I was getting to know his work in the magazines, it was the Fuji GX617. And fully self-taught photographer again. Now, Lee was very lucky that he had also a natural ability of writing. And he got a job at a photography magazine where they asked him to do an article on a camera. And he was a bit hesitant about doing it. Anyway, he did it. And that's when he found out he was a natural at writing. And he's now the world's most renowned photography book author. I think he's got about 18 photography books to his name. He now resides down in Cornwall. And like Tom, he's photographed every corner of the planet. You know, he runs workshops all over the world, maybe not this year. And again, like Tom, he only spends 2 or 3 months of the year in England. The rest of it is just traveling, running workshops and photographic holidays. Nowadays, he's more known for his black and white. And if you go onto his website, you'll see a lot of his black and white, long exposure black and white. And his images of Cuba and all around these places, they're very, very good. He's a very, very good photographer and another lovely all-round chap. But yeah, so this was the very first image I saw of Lee's, of the old Mesa Arch of Utah, United States. Now, anyone who doesn't know, the Mesa Arch isn't actually that big. And he told me that when he took this, he was the only person there. Now, nowadays, if you want to shoot this, you need to be there about 3 to 4 hours before sunrise to get your spot. And if you're not there, if you leave it any later, closer to sunrise, you just won't get there. And usually by sunrise, apparently there's about 30 photographers all in a line. Not for me, I prefer late places to myself. But yeah, it's a classic shot with the pinnacle in the distance, and the sunlight catches the wall below the arch, which is obviously sand. What's the word I'm looking for? Sandstone colour, which obviously gives it that beautiful orange glow. But again, it's seeing images like this which gets you to thinking about travelling and you know, shooting further afield. Even though I've never been to the States, it's on my long list, and it has. Yeah. Now then, the Seychelles. I saw this, and it's an image that reminds me of Isle of Lewis. There's a beach on Isle of Lewis called in Hugh Bay called Ardroyle Beach, and it's got a very, very similar view. It's got hills in the distance, the turquoise blue water, and all these rocks. I mean, you know, and what I think I loved about this image and what first drew to it was a different scene from the Seychelles scenes that you normally see. And yeah, a very simple composition, but it works. Again, shot on the good old Fuji Velvia. Yeah, just another beautiful, a beautiful bit of work. Excuse me, I'm just gonna have a plug and wet and a dry throat. So back to the UK and Dartmoor. I remember first seeing this, thinking that it was up in Troffer somewhere, or even up on Twistleton Scar, something like that, up at Yorkshire, you know. And again, just a very simple composition. The use of the light is positioned the sun in such a perfect position just aside of the branch to get the sunburst effect. And what that does as well, it spreads the light all across the foreground, which gives you just lightens the foreground up. And it's just a great technique. Again, shot on Fuji Velvia, just, you know, and it's just another beautiful image. June 45, again, I saw this I think it was in Practical Photography. He'd done a huge article on over that district of area, because he goes there a lot, runs a lot of holidays, workshops over there, does Lee. And again, it's just a classic composition, you know, the lower sand on the third, the tree on the third, and then we've heard about other people talk about triangles in the image, you know, the use of light and dark, it just so works. The tree's in sunlight, but the side of the sand dune isn't, and it just makes it all pop. Now this is an image that he's posted a lot in quite a few of his books. Was this? And it's maybe not one of the big wide scenes that you sort of used to seeing by these guys, but it's a shot what works. You've got the bridge coming in on the left, and he wrote an article about it, about how quick you've got to be sometimes to capture the light. And as you can see, there's got quite dark brooding sky, and it was obviously coming over, and it was one of them shots where you've just got that little bit of a gap on the horizon, and the sun drops into it and illuminates everything with that beautiful golden light, and you've only got seconds to work. Now, when you're shooting film, you've got to be quick, you know. So it's a quick spot meter off the sunlit buildings for a mid-tone, dial it in, cock the shutter, and fire it. And he's got the shot in the bag. But again, I just love scenes like this. Just such a simple. It just, you know, you could almost be stood there looking across the estuary to the town of Berwick in Northumberland. Lee used to live up there, as I said earlier, so he's one of his used to be one of his local haunts. Yeah, so I think that might round up Lee Frost. It does. And so the last photographer was David Norton. I would have thought most people would know more about David than any of the others. He's proper world-renowned landscape photographer from Milbourne Port in Dorset, and he's been roving for landscape photography for 30 years, if not more. And he also publishes the acclaimed F11 photography magazine. And his passion for the world's most beautiful places is just renowned. He has photographed the complete globe, this guy. And again, back in the day of the magazines, he was on the Fuji GX617. He's a full digital now. He sold all his film stuff. I did try to find a picture with the Fuji, but I couldn't. And yeah, and he sold images to everybody worldwide. He's worked for everybody worldwide. He still does. He's still on a mission. And you'll definitely see some of David's my work in David's, as the other guys as well. So yeah, Derwentwater Lake District in autumn. Only really works in autumn, this shot, when the sun's directly rises in front of you. And this is the old Brandlau jetty, which was just superb. It looks quite straight from there, but when you look at it from the side, it's all rickety and bendy. But what's nice about it is that the planks run out towards. And again, just a simple use of composition. The far banking and hills right on the third. The jetty bang in the middle, running you right into the image. And he's got, I would say, I guess he's got a 3-stop neutral density on here and a 3-stop grad jolt exposure on sky, just to get that movement in the sky. Tricky shots when you're shooting on Belvier because, like I said earlier, you've got so little room. You know, you can make or break an image very, very easily. And yeah, I went and had a recce at this with the kids one day when it was raining. I thought, right, I'm going to go and do that. I don't like normally doing shots what other people have done, but there's not a lot else you can do. It is just such a classic shot. Anyway, when I went, as I was walking down to the jetty, and I was sort of head torch on the jet, and I thought that looks a bit bright. And as I got to it, literally the week after I'd been, they'd ripped this one down and built a new one. I was absolutely gutted. And they'd built it with decking on the top, but running the opposite way, and it was just yeah, it was horrible. But yeah, these and the shots like this, what I used to see of David's, and what inspired me of this sort of stuff is the use of long exposures on film. Because anyone who's shot film will tell you, it's, especially with these cameras, it's not easy. It's a bit of a fine art, especially on Fuji Velvia. So to Scotland and the Old Man of Stowe. This is taken off what photographers call as the photographer's mound. Anyone who's been up to Stowe, as you walk up and the Stowe's on your left, as you walk up, there's a piece of ground which is flat, maybe 20-foot circle. And this is the view that you get off that. There are better viewpoints round to the right hand side, but you're looking right into the sun in autumn. So this is your best for your side light. Yeah, again, it's just the use of light, the use of the light, the quality of light, shooting in the right time of day. Obviously, this is dawn. And yeah, simple composition, let the light do the rest. Can't really go wrong at the Stowe, to be fair. And over to Paris. And this is one of the first sort of shots that I'd seen in a magazine of the Blue Hour. And again, it sort of opened my eyes up to just shooting at dawn and dusk. You know, I'd heard people talk about night photography, and you just think that once it's gone dark, but totally wrong. The best time to photograph night shots is the Blue Hour, when it's half and half, and the sky balance is perfect with the artificial lights. And is purposely just put the Notre Dame just out of off center on purpose, I'm guessing, because otherwise you'd have had too much unwanted detail in this bottom left corner. But again, because of the time of day and you're shooting a very, very slow film, it's probably 3 or 4 minutes, flattens the water out, you get all the beautiful reflections. Me and Karen went, Paris, well, we've been a few times now. Last time we went 4 days after the fire, and we shot off the bridge, but it was a sorry old sight, a very sad sight to see. So yeah, it's shots like this that opened my eyes to shooting in the Blue Hour. Again, tricky on film. Bit more local to home. Tarnhouse Lake District. Again, another image I saw in one of the magazines with a little arc or row. I think it called it Fleeting Light or something like that. And again, a shot that especially when you're shooting film, you've got to be really quick. You know, now when you're getting fleeting light like this all the time, you can actually work out your exposure and have everything set up on the camera, because everything on these cameras is set up on the lens. The Fuji GX17, as was Tom's 5x4. That's one thing I never mentioned, was that these cameras are total mechanical. There's no batteries in them. There's no light meter in them. You've got to use an independent light meter to work out your meter readings. So shots like this, he can work his meter reading out and then just wait with the shuttlecocks until the light's in the places that he wants it to be. And it's things like that which I picked up on and learned from an early age. But yeah, just a classic autumn scene in lakes. Now this is just a stunning shot. When you're shooting on Fuji Velvia, as I've mentioned several times, it make or break an image very easy if you get it wrong. Now, he's obviously had to coincide this with the tide at sunset. The sun's setting way off to the west, just illuminating St. Michael's Mount. He's coincided it with high tide, which is receding. It's a 15-minute exposure, this. So he's got lots of things to contend with. He's got the setting sun, which is, so the light's dipping all the time. He's got to control his light meters readings all the time. He's got a 3-stop neutral density filter on, flatten the water out. He's got a 3-stop neutral density grad to hold the exposure on the sky. So he will have been, as the light was falling, he would have been constantly doing exposure readings to work out what he was at. Because when you're shooting Fuji Velvia, any exposure over a second, you go into the old reciprocity failure, where the film basically requires more time. Now, back in the day when these shots were taken, there was no apps, obviously there was no mobile phones, I don't think then. So there was no app. Nowadays, I use an app. I can just type in 1 minute exposure. It tells me exactly what I need. Back then, he had to work it all out mathematically. So that just shows you how good these shots are. It's really, really good. But yeah, it's a 15-minute exposure. And again, just a very, very simple composition. The causeway leading you straight down to St. Michael's Mount at sunset. And again, something I learned, again, what stuck with me about messing around with long exposures. I think that was the last of Tom's, yeah. So we are now on to this guy. And that's me there up at Littledale with the Fuji. Oh, little people know how actually big it is. I don't know if you can see that. I can't see myself on my camera, so I can't. There, you can sort of see how big the Fuji is. It's a fair old beast of a camera, 12 inches wide. And I showed you a piece of film up before about with the 5x4. Well, that's the 6x17 negative from that camera. When scanned, produces a 700 to 800 megabyte file, nearly 24,000 pixels wide. It gives you some indication of the size of the negative. And why we use these is purely so we can print big. You can print 12 foot wide from that at 300 dpi. Now, usually when you go bigger, you can drop that DPI right down to some of the panoramas I've done for Royal Bank of Scotland. They were done digitally mined, were printed at 100 DPI. I mean, they were like 19 meters wide. Yeah, it gives you a scale of the sort of the size of the camera. Yeah, so there's the camera on with the light meter. And that lens is the 105mm lens. And these cameras have a viewfinder, which are absolutely superb, because if you're going out on days if we're just going to do a recce, you can just take both viewfinders without taking everything else, and you just use them as a loop, basically. And they're a great device. The 180mm lens, what you can see on there, is about 50mm, and the 105mm is equivalent to about a 24mm full frame. And the picture on the right is on top of Helvellyn. So yeah, that's a bit about that camera. So first image I'm going to show you is quite a well-known image of mine. It's been my biggest seller for a long, long while. And you can probably see why. A very, very rare temperature inversion right across Lancaster and Morecambe Bay on a very, very cold Christmas Eve. And I put this in because after I'd sold my Canon, I got a Nikon D70, which was my very first digital camera. And I totally fell in love with digital straight away. It was like, whoa, look at this, you know. It was just a total game changer, you know. And the fact was, because I always knew that panoramic was going to be such a huge part of my work, especially after the inspirations I had off them three guys, I could instantly crop my images. Now, I took this around the time that I'd started to. This was taken 15 years ago this Christmas Eve, and I'd just started experimenting with doing digital stitches. This particular night, the conditions were too good and I didn't want to risk messing up. So I just shot at about 70mm and then just cropped top and bottom to get the composition. So yeah, that's why I just wanted to show you that image. So yeah, so we're on to back to Buttermere. Now, if you remember Tom Mackey's image, obviously Tom had the whole mountain in a little bit. He was shot on a bit wider lens. This was shot on the 180mm lens. And like Tom's, you know, it's exactly the same scenario. You've got to wait until the sun's just at the water's edge before you fire the shutter, because you don't want to see a bit of shade on that bank, and you don't want the sun clipping these trees. And this took 10 years to get this image, and to be honest, I'm still not 100% happy. It's got a lot of things. Obviously, you need the clear sky. It's got to be autumn, because that's the only time that the sun comes to the side of Fleetwith Pike and catches this banking as it does. I mean, it does it in spring, obviously, as well, but everything's green and it just doesn't work. You need that bracken to be in full autumn colour. You obviously need a still lake and hopefully a bit of mist. And you need the water level to be just right. On this particular occasion, it was just a little bit high. But I'd been round round the other side on that gravel bank, and I was debating if to go and give it a go or not, because I'd already got some really good images. And I thought, well, I'll go down, because the sun was somewhere below this rock up here. So I walked around, and it took me ages to get a composition I like, purely just because the water level was a bit high. And I didn't think it was going to happen, because it was one of the mornings where we'd had mist and then it went, and then a bit of a ripple come and it went. And I put the film in. I'd done the light meter reading because it was easy to do off the orange and the opposite bank. I had everything dialed in the camera. The shutter was cocked, no filters on here at all, just 380mm lens. And I think I texted Karen just to see how she was or whatever. And at this point, there was a ripple. And I remember just looking up, and it had just gone a mirror, and I haven't got a clue where the mist arrived come from. And I fired the shutter and got the shot. And I had another 3 shots on the roll, which normally I would have bracketed, but as soon as it finished, a ripple come and it had gone. It had gone into thing. So yeah, so I've got Tom Mackey to thank for that. So cheers, Tom. So back to Paris again. And again, going back to David's not on the Seine. David Norton shot of the Seine and Notre Dame. what gave me inspiration for these places. And Paris is just, it's so beautiful in the blue hour. You know, when it's lit up at night, it's just amazing. Again, this was shot on the 180mm lens. We'd gone this particular trip, and they just had a record snowfall, and it was horrendous. The conditions were just horrendous everywhere. The pavements, the Seine was flooded, because normally there's lights under here and all along here, but the causeways were just full of water, so obviously they turned the power off. But yeah, again, just a very simple shot, simple composition. The far bank on the third, the stanchions, whatever you want to call them, the towers breaking it up, and then just shot at perfect time when the light balance is perfect with the lights. This was shot on Kodak Hector. I remember that Fuji Value was starting to get a bit pricey, so I started sort of experimenting with color negative film, because it was just far cheaper, and the beauty of it, you didn't need to bracket, so you could, if you wanted to do 4 different compositions on a roll, you could, and you know, because there was a bit more leeway with the film. So that's why that was shot on Hector. I did actually shoot it on Velvia as well. So back to the long exposures and experimenting. So this was a trip to Venice that we'd had, and this, what you don't realise is it's neon dark. This is a 10-minute exposure, and what makes the shot for me is that the lights on the piazza behind us are lighting up the gold emblems on the top of the bobbing gondolas. And again, very, very hard to nail this on Velvia 50. I'd done a meter reading, and I think I was at about 16 minutes, something like that. But obviously, as each minute goes by, it's getting lighter and lighter, and I'm constantly taking meter readings and checking, and everything's going through my head. I've even got a grad on. I probably put it on a bit early, really, because it was still quite dark, but I knew as it was going to get bright, the grad would drop into place. And yeah, there are always weird moments when you fire it off, you know, when you end the exposure, because you think, oh, have I done it? Have I done long enough? Have I blown it? Have I blown the highlights? Have I totally blocked the shadows up? And when you're shooting this type of film, you get one go at it. You know, I actually finished the exposure at 10 minutes. And when I set the next exposure running, about 3 or 4 minutes in, all the lights went out on the piazza, and the shot just didn't work. All the gold just disappeared, the light had disappeared, and so yeah. So again, it's inspiration from these guys what led me to sort of traveling and taking these sort of shots. Again, back to Isle of Skye and the Old Manor Store. So again, this was taken off the photographer's mound. This image is actually called The Engagement. 30 seconds before I took this, I just got down on one knee and proposed to Karen. So we were actually drinking a bottle of that even deserved a kiss. Now you've thrown me now. Yeah, we were actually drinking a bottle of champagne when we took this. The light had been sort of coming and going, and it had not been that good. And yeah, yes, there had. Yeah, as Karen just said to me, there was also a rainbow right behind us, but I didn't want to. Yeah, but yeah, it was a quick light meter reading off this sunlit grass, dial it in, and that was the shot. And again, dawn, you know, all dawn or dusk, when the light's at its absolute best. And Scotland, when the light's good, it's good, especially in autumn. So Northumberland, another shot that was another planned and timed shot that I had to time it with the sunrise. I can't remember what time of year it was now, this. But obviously I had to coincide it with a high tide at sunrise. I try to always coincide it when the tide's actually starting to recede. And so you've got the ebbing and flowing on the beach, because obviously then you get the reflection on the sand. February. Karen says February. Now the rocks that I'm stood on here is called Harkness Rocks at the end of Bamborough Beach. And it's quite hard to get compositions here because there's so much going on. So I tend to, especially on this camera, I tend to like coming to the front, and you can break it up. So I've got the two lumps of rock coming into leading you in. This was a 4-minute exposure on Fuji Velvia. And I remember when I posted this on social media, I remember Tom Mackey commenting and saying that it's one of the best images that he'd ever seen of Bamborough, which was a huge compliment coming off one of the guys I've just spoke about. You know, it just blew me away. So back to the Isle of Skye again. This is the Trotnos Peninsula. So anyone who doesn't know, this is the footpath what runs to the Quorang on Isle of Skye, shot on the 180mm lens. And again, it's David Norton who sort of inspired me to start going to Skye after seeing all the images of it and on the 6x17. The range here, which I'm just showing with your mouse, is the Stow, where the old man, you can't actually see the Stow, it's just slightly behind there, but covered in snow. But again, dawn, we had absolutely stunning light that morning. So yeah, again, you know, a shot what comes from inspiration of the other guys. Back to Northumberland again, St Mary's Lighthouse. Again, another very carefully planned shot. The tide has got to be right with sunrise, and ideally you want it again. You want sort of the high tide, maybe half an hour, 20 minutes on just before sunrise, so it's starting to go out, exposing the causeway. There's no neutral density on this. It was quite dark. The glow that morning was just unbelievable. And what always appealed to me was the angles of these lights coming down, just bringing you to the lighthouse. And there was 3 other photographers either side of me there that morning. It was a nightmare. And again, experiment on Kodak Hector. And it's a very nice film, it's called Kodak Hector, because it's still a very punchy film with the colours like velvet. Back to the Old Man Store again. Again, you know, shooting in wild weather. You know, it all comes from these guys. And this was just taken just below the photographer's mound. This was on the following, exactly to the day that we got engaged. We were drinking champagne again. And but this day was wild. We had to get on the south side of the photographer's mound to...
We lost an umbrella. It actually wrecked our umbrella and we were seriously sheltering. It was wild.
As the hailstone showers come through and you can see the rising sun just colouring it up a bit. And then we're down to my very last image. So I do shoot digital, mainly for commissions, and the book that I'm working on for Photo View, photographing the Northwest, is all done digitally. There are some film images in it. I do still, you know, I use both a lot. But obviously for all commission work nowadays, they mainly want film, and at the minute I'm shooting a Nikon D850 with all professional Nikon gold rim glass. And this was taken about a month ago at Talisker Bay. And again, shots like this, it's all about controlling your shutter speed, so you get the exact shutter speed you want for that effect. Usually about 3 seconds is about right for these images. And it's shot at 60mm, really, really wide to get the whole bay in. So yeah, that is my talk on the 3 chaps who inspired me.